May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom and welcome all to our ongoing classes in a series which I've entitled How to Live a Godly Life, Legends of the Talmud, with of course emphasis on the mystical aspect. I am your host, Ariel Tzadok. You find me online, KosherTorah.com. We are learning in this class in the Tractate Hagigah, probably one of the most famous Talmudic stories of them all. This is a story that I have seen echoed even in the writings of psychologists like Carl Jung and Erich Fromm. This is a story which has such profound significance and conceals within it so many very deep and profound secrets, the likes of which many of you are going to find shocking. I am of course referring to the story of the four great sages who made the ascent into what is called the Pardes. In our English version of the book by Rabbi Finkel, we are reading on page 347. In our previous class, I read this story to you. And I did not comment on it other than to say that that's what this class is going to be about. Well, I am going to share with you now insights into this material from numerous different sources, from the writings of the Ariel and later sources, as well as to grant you insights into what may be some historicity behind the events, and then to reveal to you some very deep truths, the likes of which, as I say, you might find disturbing. And they are controversial, but nonetheless they are tried and true. This story I have covered in greater detail in an essay that I wrote many, many years ago, and I included in my book, Walking in the Fire. For those of you who want to learn about what's called the lesson of the four who entered the Pardes, the dangers inherent upon the path of ascent, you will find it in Walking in the Fire on page 435 and following. Now, let me explain. We're going to learn about the four great sages, Ben Azai, Ben Zomer, Aher, and Rabbi Akiva. We're not going to really spend that much time on Ben Azai and Ben Zomer. What happened to them? These are the ones who looked around and died, the one who looked around and went insane. I covered that again in great detail in the chapter in Walking in the Fire. I am going to emphasize tonight the third of this party, Elisha ben Abuya, who became known as the Other, or Aher. It is his story that is elaborated in the greatest detail, and the continuing legends in the Talmud, which we are going to cover, God bless us, is going to tell us more about him and his student, Rebbe Meir. This story about Aher is very important. Now first, just as a quick review. Alright? Again, many of the details I'm not going to get into because you'll find it in the writing. These four, Ben Azai, Ben Zomer, Elisha ben Abuya, and Rabbi Akiva, made this ascent into the Pardes. Now, let's ask some fundamental questions. Why them? Why not anybody else? Were there more than four? Why four, not three? Why four and not five? Okay. What exactly is an ascent into the Pardes in the first place? Is it some actual physical travel to another world, dimension? Did they get together and perform some kind of a ritual which created a rift in space-time, and they would walk through it like we would think a wormhole? All kinds of questions we can ask, and yes, we do have answers. But stop. Don't ask first what they did. Ask first why they did this. Why did 4 people do this? Why not 1? Why not 2 together? Didn't we learn earlier that the Ma'aseh Merkava is only taught one-on-one? The person has to be able to practice and understand on their own. So why do we have 4 people here together? In order to give you insight into this, I'm going to take you into one of the later understandings and insights into this material that we find in the writings of the great Tzfat Kabbalist Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Ariel. He writes with great insight into the nature of what this episode is all about, and I will explain it to you. I covered this again in my book and in other sources. You must understand as a foundation the nature of what we call war. We all know what war is, don't we? Nation goes against nation. You pick up your guns and your bombs and you shoot and you blow up things until you win. Well, that's one way to fight a war. But go back into history, even into modern times, and you will find every government has always had a department related to war which was specifically designed to fight the war using occultic or magical powers. We find this going way back to the days of the Bible, when King Balak of Midian is terrified of an attack by Israel. So, he solicits the help of the great sorcerer Balaam, who asks, curse the people for him. Well, nothing has changed under the sun. Nothing is new. We find that even in recent times, in spite of constant public denials, the American government, through its Central Intelligence Agency, had operations called remote viewing, in which they would hire psychics who would be able to clairvoyantly project out their minds and read the plans of the enemy. If you want to go and do some research, you will find that other governments, be it the Chinese, the Russians especially, and others, have very much been involved in what we call psychic espionage or psychic warfare. The nature of the present form of these things are, of course, completely classified beyond the top secret. Any and all government agencies will, of course, deny such things and poop-on laugh at such things as a means to, of course, spread disinformation. But it was popularly known that as late as in the presidency of the late Ronald Reagan, that his wife Nancy guided the scheduling of the meetings for the President of the United States in accordance to astrological charts. These things are well known. Why am I bringing this up? It's because you must understand this concept of psychic warfare, still performed today. And this act of these 4 was an act of psychic warfare. That is how we understand the teachings of the Arizal. Let's put this into a point in history. Rabbi Akiva, as we know from other sources in history and the Talmud, was very active in the military insurrection led by Shimon bar Koziba, who became known as Bar Kokhba, who Rabbi Akiva proclaimed to be a redeemer and a savior for Israel, and the manner and role as the old judges were. He called them the Messiah. Now, in the end, Bar Kokhba fell. Rabbi Akiva and others were tortured and executed for their role in the insurrection. But this act of the four has the historical basis that indeed their intent at this time was specifically an act of psychic warfare in this battle with the Romans led by Bar Kokhba. We are taught in numerous mystical sources that any and all conflict and wars fought here on earth are only a mirror reflection of those which are fought and either won or lost in what we call heaven. The energetic forces that guide and direct life and course here on earth. Rabbi Akiva, Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, and Elisha ben Abuya together sought a psychic assault on the forces above that would indeed, if they had won, neutralized that which we call the fundamental forces of evil or klipa, and would have set clear the path for Bar Kokhba's victory. The Ariel writes about this, that each one of these four had a distinct and independent mission. In Kabbalistic sources, specifically those of the Ariel, which I've described in detail in our Otzrot Chaim series, there are what we call Arba'a Mochin, four brains, Chochma, Bina, Hasidim, and Gevurot. And that each of these needs a process which we call rectification. And these are mental functions, these are projections of thought, and these four, therefore, reflecting the reality of the four universal forces, combined themselves with each one attempting a psychic rectification to repair each of these four fundamental forces so as to align them properly. This is how the Ariel explains their attempt. A very direct act of psychic warfare. And the Ariel also explains what their mistake was and why they failed. He states there very clearly that ultimately such an attack is not against some outside physical force, but an inside, if you will, psychological disposition towards what we can call smallness, call it evil or whatever. And that each of these four, rather than trying to attach to and repair each of the four mochin individually, had to indeed combine forces and do it collectively. And it was in their individuality that they each became prone to attack, and the rest is, of course, recorded. So understand this story in the context of where it needs to be in warfare. Now, as I said, Ben Azai, Ben Zoma did not fare well. We know that, of course, Ben Azai, as it says, he gazed and died. Well, it's taught about Ben Azai that he was such a pure and holy human being, he apparently was not even married, that once he gazed upon this greater reality underlying our own, it was so overwhelming that he decided not to return. He forgot about the war, the battle, and was embraced in the rapture of the experience, and that was that. Whereas we learn later that Ben Zoma gazed and he says it went insane. Apparently, for Ben Zoma, What he saw was just such an overwhelming experience, his mind couldn't handle it, and it broke. Let's put it bluntly. And now, we go to Aher. Again, with regards to Aher, it says that he destroyed the plants, uprooted the roots, as it says. What on earth? That's a very strange and bizarre type of metaphor, right? What does it actually mean that he uprooted the young plants, the saplings? Well, let's look at the metaphor. Seeds grow in the ground. Got it? What happens if you pull out the seeds as they're growing? Needless to say, you have stopped growth. Therefore, Aher hindered, prevented the process, let's use the word, evolution, growth, maturity. He took one look and says, what's this all about? Now, what? It says here that they made him renounce Judaism and the like, but you've got to understand this in a little bit more of an accurate way. Again, that I describe the sources in my book, and you can look there. The story says here that Aher, when he went up, he saw the angel Metatron. And he's sitting down, and he's writing down the merits of Israel. And Aher says, hey, no one sits in heaven other than God, so if Metatron's sitting, maybe there are two gods. And that caused him to abandon Judaism. Think about that. What's the connection between abandoning Judaism and seeing that an angel sits in heaven? I don't know about you, but I don't even see a connection. That would be like to me to say, oh, look, I have a pair of glasses on my desk. You know what that means, don't you? That they just raised the price of anchovy pizza in Oregon. And you go, what? The heck? What does that have to do with anything? Well, that's the same I'm asking you. So what if he sees an angel sitting in heaven? What does that have to do with renouncing Torah and Judaism? It says here because he thinks that there are two forces. Well, so what? Well, I mean, anybody knows anything about mysticism knows about the grades, knows about the angels. I'm going to tell you this. Notice how nonchalantly the Talmud throws in here reference and mention to the archangel Metatron. You got to know who Metatron is. You find references to Metatron in much of the literature of the day. Went on for hundreds of years before this story was codified in the Talmud. We read about Metatron in Enochian literature. We read about it in ancient literature. We read about it in other places in the Talmud. We read about the relationship of Enoch to Metatron. We read about his special place. He's called the small Yud-K Vav-K. He is called the angel of God. And many other things. He's a big guy up there. And there's a big secret about Metatron. And again, I cover all those secrets and the laws or ways of Metatron again. Unless it's on KosherTorah. First of all, we all know that the nature of this ascent was psychic, clairvoyant. Not astral travel per se, but the travel of the mind. So the four of them sat together, went into a meditative trance, and ascended. We know, because obviously they knew, that anything that goes and what you see in a trance has to be understood archetypally, metaphorically and symbolically. Rabbi Akiva, of all things, said to them, hey, when you get up to the certain place, don't say water, water. Don't be confused by these images that you see. And that's another issue I'm not going to get into right now. But the warning was there. Elisha Aher is no dummy. He was a brilliant Talmudic sage. This is not his first ascent into heaven, neither Rabbi Akiva ben Azar ben Zomas. They knew darn well what to do and how to do it. So for Aher to see a vision of Metatron sitting there writing the merits of Israel is not going to lead him to say, gee whiz, I think I'm going to reject Torah, mitzvot, and Judaism and go out and sleep with some hookers and eat ham sandwiches on Yom Kippur. No! Where is the connection here? Okay, let's get down to what happened. According to sources, again, which I quote in the book, Aher ascends into the greater world. Ben Azai saw this, and he loved it. He says, I'm staying. Ben Zoma couldn't handle it. Elisha ben Abuya handled it very well. He saw, he knew, he experienced, and, as it states, he confused what's called the supernal unity and the lower unity. The Yehud Elyon and the Yehud Tachton. What's that mean? Well, in order to understand this, I have to share with you some teachings that our sages have taught. We're taught that when Mashiach comes and what we call the great rectification is made, we're not going to have the need anymore to observe the commandments of the Torah. We will have evolved spiritually to a higher level where all of these restrictions and prohibitions will no longer be applicable to us because we will be of a different nature. We will truly have a new covenant, which is an evolutionary transformation of Homo sapien human to, let's make up a title and call it Homo superius. Yes, the transformation in Messianic time will not only be spiritual, it will also be genetic. Well, Elisha, when he ascended to heaven and saw the greater picture, saw the ultimate goal of things, perceived the ultimate unity, reality of the ultimate conclusion of human history. It was as if his mind was set free. And he could then look and see life on earth below in a state of mental slavery, what we call klipot. He could see how limiting it is, restrictive, primitive. He could see that the laws of the Torah were given as a means to an end, and that he himself had already accomplished that end. He got it. He's there. He was rectified. He was whole. As such, he became a messianic soul before the time of the coming of the Messiah. Now, you can read about this in books. You can read a book called When Mashiach Comes by Rabbi Hiyun, published by Targum Press. They have a whole chapter in there of the transformation and nullification of the laws. When Mashiach comes, you go there for all the sources for that if you need that type of reinforcement. But this is a well-documented idea and belief. Elisha achieved this level in this world prior to the coming of Mashiach. He knew darn well Rabbi Akiva's warning, don't say water, water. Don't think that there is a Yehud Elyon and a Yehud Tachton, because they both merge and blend into one. He says, be careful. But Aher says, I've achieved the higher level. I have no more of a need to go down into the lower level. And therefore, when he came out of his trance, he says, I have risen above. And I choose not to go back into mental slavery, into the klipot. This is symbolized by his seeing Metatron. Because, as we say, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei rules in heaven by one reality, and Metatron, as God's agent, is in control of things down here with an entirely different agenda. While we are today in a state of exile, we need Torah and mitzvot to guide us. Now, it is not just the mitzvot which speak about moral character, proper behaviors, one towards another. Those, obviously, will continue forever. But the ritual applications, most, to this very day, have no idea that the ritual observances of Jewish law are, to use a Jungian term, archetypes of the Jewish collective unconscious, which are ritual structures which give form to a language and communication of the unconscious. That's what the mitzvot are all about. And you and I could say, well, if that's all that it is, then why do I do it? Well, number one is because God did command it. Number two, and here's the big kicker. You and I are all part of a greater collective. We do not exist as individuals. We exist as a greater part of a greater whole. And as such, we have obligations to that whole. As the Talmud had said, all of Israel are interconnected with one another. Kol Yisrael arovin ze leze. This is what Carl Jung was echoing when he spoke about the collective unconscious, which unites all mankind, and of course the racial subdivisions within that collective unconscious. So at a deep level, we are all interconnected, and as such we have an influence upon one another, psychically, psychologically, and in every other way. Aher recognized the upper way and chose not to descend back to the lower way. Now you might say, well, I mean, all the respect, that would be right for him, no? And the answer, of course, is no. Because ultimately, one cannot express freedoms in a place where all others are in prison. This is the big deal. Aher recognized and transcended the need for the mitzvot, and therefore had no longer a need for them. He could eat a ham sandwich, and it wouldn't blemish his soul. He, in turn, would elevate the ham. That's how kadosh, how holy he was. So why couldn't he do it? The answer is real simple. Because here in this world, you'll forgive the term, monkey see, monkey do. Which means, if Aher Elisha ben Abuya was tolerated and accepted in a comprehensive transcendence of the laws and the commandments, others would have learned from him, hey, if he could do it, I can do it. And, no, you can't. We must learn a fundamental lesson. In spite of our political and philosophical cries that we are all equal, the reality is no, we're definitely not. There are those of us who have abilities which others just don't. And that's the reality of it. We are not equal. Not everybody can do what Elisha ben Abuya did. And if they tried, then rather than fix and help and elevate, they would break. They would destroy. They would cause dissent. And therefore the sages, his peers, turned to Rabbi Elisha and said, what are you doing? I'm practicing my freedom, he says. Yeah, well, we know, but you can't do that. This is not the time. This is not the place. We're not in Shemaim. We are still in the evolutionary process of the growth of human souls. What you're doing is sabotaging that growth, symbolically ripping up the shoots You can't do this in public. You can't be like this. And he said, well, yes, I can. And then they said, we have no other choice. We have to disavow you. We have to disassociate from you. And this is exactly what they did. And then the legend here says that God rejects Aher. The voice goes forth from heaven to say, no, he's a bad guy, etc., and so on. Right? It says that he went to a prostitute, etc., and so on. But now, here's the interesting thing. While all of his peers turned their back on him personally, he is still well respected, well received, under a different name. Rather than refer to him by name and let everybody identify with him, his teachings, his Torah, was still preserved. So in essence, what the sages did was more damage control. They disavowed him as the identity, but not as the person. He is now called the other, Aher. And many a time in the teachings of the Mishnah, which again were the laws from his day, there are constant references to Rabbi so-and-so says this, Rabbi so-and-so says that, and then a third one says Achirim, which means others say. And there are those who interpret that the reference to these others is to the other, Aher, Elisha ben Abuya. And to validate or to reinforce this, as we will see as we proceed in our text, his top student, Rebbe Meir, never leaves his side. For him, whatever the Rebbe does is holy. And he never leaves his side. Rabbi Akiva, as we learned, entered and exited in peace. He knew the upper ways, and he also knew and recognized the necessary nature of things here below. So let's put this into a little proper context. Let's talk about all the laws that we observe. Now, we have biblical obligations. We're not going to contest that. But how about rabbinic practices, traditions, even those which we call minhag? Do we really have to observe them? The answer is clearly no. They are superfluous. They're very nice, and if you wish to do it, do so. But if you live in a specific religious community wherein certain norms are expected of you, and you do not act in accordance to those norms, you stand to create terrible strife, controversy, division, and a whole bunch of bad stuff. You can say, well, I'm right. Yeah, you are right. You don't have to do all of that stuff, and they're wrong for thinking so. But you're not going to change all of them. So therefore, what you practice, you can practice. But sometimes, as it says in Pirkei Avot, si'ag lehochma shtika, that a true sign of wisdom is silence. Let me give you a personal example. Many, many years ago, I was visiting some Haredi, that's the black hat, ultra-Orthodox, Ashkenazi friends. And we were invited to one of their neighbors' homes for the Sabbath. I was the Rav, the rabbi, so I was a guest of honor. And the local Ashkenazim were discussing different issues about how they have two separate stoves in their kitchen. One for cooking meat and one for cooking dairy. And they had a question with regards to what happens if something gets mixed up. And I opened my mouth and I said, it's interesting that you have two separate stoves. Because in many religious homes, most don't. They all use the same stove. And indeed it is okay to do so. And therefore your question is really a moot point. When I said that, you could hear a pin drop in that room of about 20 to 30 people. In their eyes, I just committed sacrilege. What do you mean? You don't have separate meat and dairy ovens in your kitchen? No. I mean, literally, as far as theirs concerned, I was not only disqualified as a Jew, I was disqualified as being religious. They said, we never heard such a thing. Well, I said, how about let's go look up in the Shulchan Aruch. Go look it up. And, well, people didn't really want to create controversy, so we laughed it off and, went through lunch. But my host afterwards was angry at me. He said, you embarrassed me. How could you say such a thing? The next day, I took out the Code of Jewish Law and I sat down with him for an hour. And I showed him the laws. To which he concluded and said, okay, I acknowledge it, you're right. But not as far as my neighbors are concerned. They don't know this, they don't want to know this, they want to do things their way. And I said, you're right. Well, those are the kinds of things that happen. For those of us who are appropriately educated clergy, rabbis, hachamim, we know and understand what is and is not the right and proper way. And here, where I live in the mountains of Tennessee, I practice Torah in accordance to my rabbis, to that which we know is right and proper and free and true. And all the stringencies and what I consider to be ridiculous practices of other communities have no place in my home, have no place in my community, and anyone coming here to join us is not welcome to bring those things here. So therefore we have there and we have here. Now, I can do that. But when I go back into those other communities, there are things that I have to be cautious and respectful of, because they are still at that level called the Yehud Tachton, their encased place and mindset. And so be it. That is the way things are. But know and understand, Aher really did not commit an apostasy. Aher never really rejected Judaism. What he did was practice a level of freedom, which ultimately we will all come to one day in what may or may not be a distant future. Individuals today can accomplish this, but yet they are not free to live that way. So therefore, while we are still in bodies of flesh and blood, we are limited to this world and obligated to follow in accordance to its ways. This was the message of Rabbi Akiva, and why he is our role model. Many of you might not be aware that with the fall of Bar Kokhba, Rabbi Akiva was captured by the Romans. He was ruthlessly tortured to death. Now, Rabbi Akiva could have easily escaped such torture, going into a meditative trance, escaping with his astral body, just not return to his physical body and let it just drop dead. But no. He had a purpose in the nature and method of his death, which he accomplished, and it set a role model and example for martyrs to come for centuries. This is the true story behind this legend. The nature of what this ascent was all about, and the dangers therein. When you have an actual and real spiritual experience, it can be so overwhelmingly rapturous Now you don't want to leave. I will confess to you. I have had times when I have had my own visions and dreams. And I remember clearly stating to those with whom I was communicating, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. Needless to say, I was sent back every time, or otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you. There are those times when you can see things which are confusing. Good and evil, we expect to be such distinct and different things, but they're not. Good and evil are both the right and the left hands of the one singularity, the one sentient consciousness we call God. There is no reality to a God and devil duking it out for control of the world and your souls. In Judaism, we have no belief of an eternal heaven or hell, wherein which your souls will go and be damned. There's no concept, as there is in Christianity, of a need for a salvation from your sins or you burn in hell. These are not Jewish concepts. And therefore, we look to God as the source of all good and evil. How do you deal with a God who creates evil? He allows evil to exist. He has his agents which execute it, but they could not execute such things if not by divine decree. So, look to the destruction of the first temple. God clearly spoke through the prophet Jeremiah, it's coming and everyone's going to get killed. So when the Babylonian soldiers were coming through, killing everybody, if they were to be praying to God, oh God, save me, it was God who sent those soldiers to kill them in the first place. How is that contradiction possible? Well, maybe in your eyes and mine, it's irreconcilable. But in God's higher mind and higher thought, there is no such thing as anything that is irreconcilable. All is one in his singularity. Well, Ben Zoma couldn't compute that. And he literally fractured and broke. Elisha ben Aher, ben Abuya, he got it. No problem. But why should I go back to the old ways? Rabbi Akiva says, because we have to. Because it's necessary for the continued growth of spiritual evolution. But yet, as the four of them ascended, because they went disconnected from one another, each with an individual purpose instead of a conjoined purpose, according to the Ari, that is why they failed. We learned from this that those today who make similar ascents, yes, people actually do that to this day, that they make such ascents with the specific intent of integrating all as a harmony. And while there is not yet one individual who can do it all, we each scrape off, shave off, if you will, layer after layer of whatever we are able. And ultimately and inevitably, somebody will break through the shell completely and enable the great light from within to be released. Oh, may that day so come. But with this understanding now, let's continue on our legends and the relationship of now Aher, previously referred to as Elisha ben Abuya, that was his name. And now let's address his issue. So, in page 347 in our English translation, it states that after he renounced Judaism, Aher asked his former student, Rebbe Meir, a question. Okay? What's the meaning of the verse? God has made the one as well as the other. Zelumazeh Elohim. Now remember, understand this within the light of what we've been discussing. It's a quote from Ecclesiastes 7:14. Rebbe Meir answered, means that for everything God created, He also created a counterpart. If He created mountains, then He created hills. If He created seas, He created rivers. So Acher says to Rebbe Meir, your Rabbi Akiva, remember that other guy? He didn't explain it like this, but as follows. He created righteous people, and he created wicked people. He created Gan Eden, and he created Gehinnom. Everyone has two portions. One in Gan Eden, one in Gehinnom. Since a righteous person deserves it, he takes his own portion and his fellow portion in the Garden of Eden. Since a wicked person is guilty, he takes his own portion and his fellow portions in Gehinnom. Let's explain this. This is very profound. Didn't we just say there's no eternal heaven and hell? So what's this reference to Gan Eden and Gehinnom? Well, don't think that this Gehinnom is an eternal place of condemnation and damnation, because as we're going to learn as we proceed through our stories, whereas Aher, when he died, didn't go to Gehinnom. He was considered too much a great sage. And yet he had to go there temporarily to be rectified and therefore ascend back into what we call Gan Eden. Gan Eden is what we call heaven, if you will, the traditional pearly gates and all the rest. But as is known in the deeper traditions, there's what we call the lower Garden of Eden and the upper Garden of Eden. There is a terrestrial Garden of Eden and an extraterrestrial Garden of Eden. There is a place where souls will go to after they pass, which in their image is very similar to this world, with all of the peace and pleasure and happiness of it. And yet, their souls after this period of rest, recovered, must face new duties, obligations, and therefore the teachings fundamental to Judaism, what we call reincarnation, apply, and the souls must recycle and get back to work. That's just the way it is. Whereas Gehinnom is considered to be a temporary place of refinement, fixing. It's the fix-it shop. It's the repair shop. We say that souls can go there for as much as 11 months after they pass away, because that's how long it takes to get things fixed. But that's not a concept of an eternal place of damnation. It's a place of repair. It's not a place of punishment. It's a place to fix. Tikkun is the key word here. So therefore, what Aher is teaching, now in the name of Rabbi Akiva, he says, what is this that Hashem created two things? Well, He created the place of repose and the place of repair. And he goes that the righteous, they receive the place of repose for both himself and the wicked. And the wicked receive the place of repair for both him and the righteous. And you go, huh? What does this mean? And here's the profound part. This is not referring to actual portions or anything of the kind. It's referring to the psychological orientation of the mind as it transits this physical world with the release or leaving of this physical body and goes into a higher dimension. Each of us ultimately must evolve and grow along that path. Each of us, therefore, has, if you will, a source or a pool or a reservoir of psychic energy which enables this transcendence to occur. If and when the mind is properly prepared to ascend and evolve as it translates this physical body and goes beyond, then it goes into that which it has and ascends. Now your fellow person also has that amount of energy. But yet what happens if that fellow, by the choices that they make in this world, devolves as opposed to evolves, and descends as opposed to ascend? Then you have a reservoir of energy which is left unused. Kind of like a gas can, which is going to be unused because the other guy's vehicle is broken. Well, the righteous have the right to gather all of that other psychic energy and to use it in their ascent. Now, each one of these righteous guys also has, if you will, the potential to fail, to fall, to descend. And therefore the potential, if you will, for negative energy, which will draw them down, is there. But yet, due to their proper and right decisions in this world, they escape the force that draws them down. And the wicked guy who is being drawn down by his own force, it's reinforced that which the righteous have saved or freed themselves from attaches to the fellow bad guy and drags him down even further. So you see, the choices that we make and how we live and what we do have a tremendous, profound effect. This is a nature of psychic reality that only somebody who's been there, done that, and seen it would know. So indeed, Aher and Rabbi Akiva, who had this experience, this is what Aher is now teaching to Rebbe Meir in the name of his buddy Rabbi Akiva. Again, this signifies the relationship between these two. That even though Akiva could not and would not associate with Aher, we assume that Aher might have most likely outlived Rabbi Akiva. He was 120 according to legend at the time when he was executed by the Romans. Aher most likely lived beyond this. But he was passing on these teachings, still teaching his student Rebbe Meir, and Rebbe Meir was still desirous and in the position that he indeed wanted to continue to learn. So he reveals to him a very profound reality of the nature of the psychic content of the mind once it leaves the body and has the ability to either ascend or descend, and what happens to the positive and negative energies that each soul does not use. This is rather deep. So now, Rabbi Meir says, how do we know what Aher just taught is true? He says, regarding the righteous, it says they will inherit a double portion in the land, quoting Isaiah 61:7. Concerning the wicked, it says, devastate them with double disaster, Jeremiah 17:18. So, this later authority, Rabbi Meir, why is he even brought down here? He is bringing scriptural evidence, which is considered validation, that what Aher is teaching here is not some weird mystical mumbo-jumbo, but actually hinted to and referred to in Scripture itself, therefore giving it complete validation. So therefore we should walk away from this and know and understand that what we do, how we think, vibrates energy in this world, and that there are natural elemental forces which seek our evolution and growth, and equal natural forces which seek to draw us down and devolve us. One seeks for us to ascend, the other seeks for us to descend. These are the forces in the universe, both created by God. That's what he says here. God created them both. We choose which force we follow. We know these forces, what we call it the Yetzer HaTov or the Yetzer Hara, the good or evil inclinations. There are psychological predispositions within us. There are forces of temptation. So think about it. No, the issue is not so much whether or not you're tempted to eat something not kosher. But if you cannot control your temptations, that is truly a signal of weak character, a lack of resolve, which hinders, harms, and hurts you in many other things and ways as well. That's something you're going to have to address and repair. If not in this lifetime, then in time to come. But ultimately, you will have to address it. This is not the same as someone who says, well, I want to hurt other people, harm other people, destroy other people for the specific intent of being like crazy and sadistic. Needless to say, that is a much more significant and serious blemish, which, if it's a fundamental issue within the personality, would require a tremendous amount more work in order to repair. And on the other side, the one who says, no, by nature I choose to be honorable, righteous and good. The opposite applies. One little more section here. After it says he renounced Judaism, Aher asked Rebbe Meir, hey, what's the meaning of this verse? Golden glass cannot approximate it, nor can its exchange be in golden articles. Job 28:17. So Rebbe Meir again says, hey, it's a reference to the words of Torah. They're difficult to acquire like vessels of gold and fine gold, but which are still easily broken like vessels of glass. Hinting to his rabbi, hey, you're breaking all of this stuff. And said Aher to Rebbe Meir, but Rabbi Akiva, your rabbi, remember the buddy? He didn't explain it like this, but he says again as follows. Just as vessels of gold and vessels of glass, although they can be broken, they still can be repaired. So to a Torah scholar, although he has sinned, can set himself right by doing teshuvah. So what is Aher hinting to Rebbe Meir? He's saying that even Rabbi Akiva knows, I'm not so bad. I can be fixed too. Now, Rebbe Meir darn well knew the reality of what was going on with Aher. This is teaching us that even Aher has the ability to change, and that he shouldn't be frowned upon so strong. But Rabbi Meir says, okay, then do it. Do teshuvah. Then Aher says, hey, I've already heard from behind the heavenly curtain that, quoting the verse, we read this above in the last section, where the heavenly voice says, return you wayward children, except for Aher. Alright? And Aher says, that's what I heard. Now, why is this said? You would think that the indication is that God is so angry at Aher that he would never forgive him and he's going to send him to hell forever. Well, that's not true. We learn, as we will continue in our next class, to read about what happens later, after Aher dies, and indeed how he ended up entering into what we call Gan Eden. And that's the reality of it. Aher is, let me rephrase, Elisha ben Abuya, he said, no, you're out. But at the same time, he never left. It's one of those hard things to try to understand, if you will. Some that would have made Ben Zoma go crazy. But we must understand, we exist within a context, we exist with a purpose, and even though we ourselves can do certain things, we are still limited by the collective consciousness to which we are connected. Our job is to project into the collective consciousness good and right and proper things that slowly but surely could bring about evolution, transformation, and change. Not to think of ourselves first. That was Aher's big mistake. And so with that, we've explained this section, and God be willing, in our next class we will pick up and learn more about the relationship of Rebbe Meir and Aher, what happens to Aher after his death, what happens to Rebbe Meir, and the like. So, on that, let's conclude for tonight, and God be willing, we'll see you in our next class. Thank you for joining me. I'm again your host, Ariel Tzadok. I'll see you online at KosherTorah.com. Thank you. Good night. 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 KosherTorah.com. Thank you.